Welcome to Bumming and Thriving. I have here with me a special guest today. Today, we're going to be discussing about our children's mental health. We're going to be talking about how do we uncover and discover when our kids are going through some emotional crisis. What are the tips on how to be able to discuss mental health with our kids? Because this is a topic that's important, especially in today's day and age. So, without further ado, I'm going to introduce Naomi. Naomi is a mental health expert, a mental health practitioner with the NHS. She's a social worker and a qualified counselor. She's also one of my BFFs. I've known her for a very, very long time, even before I got married. So you can imagine that's a very long time. Anyway, Naomi, welcome to and Thriving. Introduce
Thank
yourself.
you, Torian. Woo woo. So excited to be on this show. Yeah, so I'm Naomi. Naomi Bura is my maiden name. Naomi Kiba is my married name. Yeah, I knew Toyin when before she met her husband, before she had kids. Gosh, that feels like a long time ago when we had lots of energy. But yeah, I work
Mm-hmm.
mainly in the National Health Service in the UK, working with adults and currently with children who are experiencing severe mental health difficulties. And I'm really passionate about BAME people of Black and ethnic minority backgrounds, and supporting them to access really good quality care for their mental well-being. Often that's not through the National Health Service, it's from places like churches or cultural communities. So I think about how can we improve those spaces so that they're really offering good care for people who might be my friends, my sisters, my aunties, my mom. So that's a little bit about me. I am a mom. I've got two boys who keep me on my toes and a husband. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Thank you. Thank you. That was such a fantastic bio. Let's dive into the gist of the week. As mentioned in the previous episodes, this is something that's happened recently where you learned from, or something that really made you scream as a mom, or a relatable encounter in your household.
Oh gosh, less than 2 hours ago, so hot off the press, kind of driving home from Costco. So that's a really big kind of warehouse type store. My son, who was in the back seat, kind of said, "Oh, mummy, I'm really glad that we are brown people, because if we were white or peach colored people, we'll be in a lot of trouble." Now I paused to think about, do I want to know more about this? Do I just want to ignore? Is this one of those chats from a 6 year old that's just chat? But I thought, okay, let me go in. And I'm like, tell me a little bit more. What do you mean? And they said, well, white and peach people, they'll get burnt up by the sun because their skin reflects the sun. It's kind of almost autumn in the UK. So we're having kind of winter sun, which means it's really bright, but not so warm. And so I
Yeah.
was like, okay, I see where you're going with this. And it just like, there's so many parts of that, those two phrases that just kind of threw me, that we're brown people. So he's got that from somewhere, and white people are white or peach colored people. It's like, okay. And yeah, that actually, for the first time, my son was saying it's good to be a brown person. That really made my heart full, and just like, it's really changed my usual kind of mommy of two black boys perspective of, I'm gonna be defending them. I'm gonna be like ready to fight anybody who says anything. And here he is celebrating being brown. And so I went into, yeah, our skin is amazing. Our melanin means we can live in kind of places where there's really hot sun. And we're like then talking about those places. But in my heart, I was like, thank you, Lord. My work is done.
Ah, that is such a good conversation you had. Yeah, my son actually always says brown people as well. He doesn't say black. He doesn't say I'm a black boy. He says I'm brown and peach, because children see the color for what it is. Like they look at their skin and say brown. There was a time I actually thought that, do I tell him that we address ourselves as black people, not brown? But I thought, what, he's a child. Let him just say it exactly as he wants to say it. And
Yeah.
that was that was so amazing. Wow,
Oh,
where did they get these things from?
do-
These
I
kids.
don't know. Maybe this is a benefit of the 21st century. Maybe it's something from school. But absolutely, I mean, my son is 6 and he's already noticing that his friends, that their differences. He'll tell me about the
Mhm.
different hair types that his friends have. So he has friends who are kind of all colors of the sun. So
Mhm.
I'm just so aware that they are noticing things and they're making meaning. And actually, it was nice to hear that it's a positive meaning. I didn't have that when I was growing up. Nobody
Yeah.
talked to me about it. And if it was anything about being different, it was a negative. So I think
Mhm.
schools are doing better job of saying differences can be good or just different. It's amazing.
100%. 100%. I think there is now an intentional focus on having representation, even in cartoons, TV shows, movies. So there is actually, I think the media got the message eventually. It's been a
Yeah.
long time coming, but they've got the message and there's now representation, which is fantastic for our kids. Because as you said, growing up, we didn't have that. We didn't have that image to say that, okay, we could actually do this or aspire to this as well. So let me see. My gist of the week.
Oh,
So my
tell me,
gist of the
tell
week
me.
is my gist of the week is about my first about a month ago on his own. He decided to plant some seeds, like he wanted to grow something in our garden.
Mm-hmm.
I've been really busy couple of months. So I just said, okay, you get on with it. So he did it himself. And every day without fail, he waters the seed, he waters the plant. And last week, it was a month since he planted the seeds and the plants are growing nicely. And
Mm-hmm.
I noticed there was a card in the plant pot. I looked at the card, it says happy birthday, you're 1 month old today. On the, and he put it in the plant pot and I thought, oh my goodness, like he was celebrating the birthday of the plant.
Yeah.
So obviously I just like kind of laughed. I thought it was, it was cute. But it
Yeah.
just made me feel, you know what, we need to celebrate the small things. Like I
Mm-hmm.
think even as adults, we get all like we're aspiring to do something big or we're trying to get this promotion, we're trying to get this big achievement. But there's so many things every day that we could celebrate. And in a child's mind, just seeing that plant grow, he's seeing
Yes.
something that he put in the soil and watching how it's growing and it's growing
Mm-hmm.
nicely and
Mm-hmm.
decide to give them a birthday card. I
Yeah.
thought that was cute, but also instructional. Like we should celebrate the small stuff. That's
Oh,
what I think.
absolutely. And
Yeah.
for your son's age, to have been able to grow something and see it come to life. Sometimes we think things like promotions are bigger, but actually planting something and literally something appearing that he's looked after is amazing and is amazing achievement for him. Yeah,
Yeah.
those kind of nature has so many lessons for us. That sounds like something I want to do now and just like help me slow down and notice kind of the beauty in life, the things that really have
Mm,
meaning.
100%. 100%. Right, so let's dive right into today's topic. We're talking about children's mental health. I'll start from the basics. What would you say is mental wellness? Like, what does that mean to you?
Oh my gosh, so this is where I'm like on the spot as a social worker. Let's see what I
Sorry.
remember. No, 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 no. I mean, so we have the World Health Organization have a definition that most people kind of go along with, which is kind of, it's a state of wellness, and it's a state of wellness in which an individual is able to kind of take part in work, take part in society, and contribute. That definition doesn't focus on kind of your thoughts, your feelings, or emotions, and it
Mhm.
doesn't focus on things you can't do. It's a kind of a positive definition about being able to do the things you want to do.
Okay.
There are some interesting parts to that definition because the idea of work, not everybody thinks that work is important, or that's different for different people. But I like it because it says it's a state. So that means, your wellness can shift, and that's okay. That's how we all are. We have good days where we feel like, wow, I'm really feeling kind of happy in myself. I'm really feeling content in myself. And we have bad days where everything is a struggle. You have no energy. So all of that is your mental health, the bits which are powering you, the bits where it's really difficult. And it's really
Mhm.
about that becoming a concern if actually you're not able to take part in the things you want to take part. If work's important for you and you're not able to take part in that, then that's a concern. If it's for children, they're not able to take part in things like school or socializing, that's when your mental health is of concern. Otherwise, if you're able to take part in what you need to do, actually no one's going to be bothering you, or that's what it is a normal range to be in.
It's interesting you mentioned school, and this wasn't part of the questions I wanted to ask you, by the way, but I read, I'm part of a British moms group here in Dubai, and a
Mm-hmm.
person asked a question anonymously a few days ago, saying our daughter suddenly doesn't want to go to school anymore. She's literally having anxiety in the car. Like
Mm-hmm.
they've tried to speak to her about it, they've
Mm-hmm.
tried to address the situation, but she's just completely terrified of going to school. And this wasn't the case before.
Yeah.
So I think going in line with your definition, it shows like, would you classify that this is a situation where there's our mental wellness is not where it's meant to be because she's unable to go to school.
Well, it's certainly a situation that means that there needs to be a kind of an intervention, and we're seeing a rise in school refusal. Kind of, so where I work is in England, we're seeing a rise in that, and so there's a lot of work being done to understand the factors that go into that, and it might be, anxiety. So the anxiety is a kind of has two parts. There's the thoughts that something bad might happen to yourself, to other people. And then the
Mm-hmm.
is the part of it of kind of your body experiences symptoms to confirm that. So you might have kind of butterflies in your stomach, you might have kind of clammy hands, feel hot. Your body is responding as if there's a threatening situation. That's what anxiety is. And it can be really debilitating, like you're saying. It can stop you doing things like being able to go to school, and often people think like, well, nothing bad's happening, just snap out of it. But because our body is feeling things, is feeling butterflies or hot and sweaty, actually our body thinks something is happening. So hence the difficulty for that young person to go into school. Maybe it's really good idea for that parent or that family to explore, has anything in school changed? And for children, things that we adults might think are minor can be really big because they don't have as much resources to cope. So if a falling out has happened with friends in school, or somebody has said something, for a child that can be really significant. Whereas for us, we know we have to carry on, we still have to go to work, and we have ways of negotiating that children yet aren't mature enough. And other things that we think may be less important. So if a child has had the same teacher for a number of years and that teacher changes, for us, we're used to kind of changing some people around us. For children, that can be really significant because that might be the person who helped them feel safe in school, who helped them kind of navigate a world where maybe the child was having some struggle. So really having a good conversation with your child, with the school, about has anything changed? Have they noticed what's happening in the peer groups? And also refusing to go to school can also be kind of a symptom of other difficulties. So what's happening in the family? Are there changes in the family? Again, this is an area I think we maybe don't notice children. If there's a big issue in the family, we think, oh, the children don't know about it, or they don't understand about it. But
They
often
were.
they
They were.
they will know something. And if you don't know exactly what's happening, as human beings, our brains are set to make up the worst possible thing. So often children will know something difficult's going on at home, and they will have imagined something worse. And often that thing is about them being at fault or being the cause of the problem. And there can a range of things that children will refuse to go to school because that's the one thing or one of the things they have control over. So they don't have control over finances, over lots of things, but by showing you, they can show you through refusing to go to school that maybe there's another difficulty. So it can be really important to kind of take time, speak to a number of people, get a number of sources of information, and think about how to take the next steps. What I would say is there can be a lot of pressure to just get a child back in school. and feel like if they miss a day or 2 days, that's really bad. But actually pulling back a little bit from that pressure, just give yourself a chance to figure out what's going on, because your child can get supported to catch up once they have the right support behind them.
Well, there's a lot of things you said, and I wanted to address two things in particular. So the first thing you mentioned was how they refusing to go to school may be a way of them protesting and saying all is not well, all is not right. And if in that situation your child is refusing to talk to you or discuss with you, then I think there's an onus on that parent to find another trusted adult that the child can speak to, like a safe space. So forcing that child, like, we know when our children sometimes don't want to go to school because they don't feel like, this is not what we're talking about. We're talking about anxiety and real panic when the child is refusing to go to school for a while, for an extended period of time. So in that situation, just to reiterate what you're saying, you should definitely speak to your child about it. And if they're refusing to speak to you, you should get help for your child in that sense. Forcing the child to go to school is just like sweeping the problem under the carpet, because it's symptomatic of what is something else going on. Another thing you said, which I thought was a very good point, was if things are happening in the house and children are not, it's not being spoken. Say, for example, the parent is going through a divorce, and they're just kind of hiding things. What you mentioned was that a child would probably think the worst scenario and say maybe it's my fault or something. And I think we're probably better at this in our generation, where we discuss uncomfortable things with our children. But I remember that when we were growing up, a lot of things happen, and children are not, you're just kind of pushed to
Yeah.
the corner and said it's not a conversation for a child. And
Mm-hmm.
we grew up having to deal with knowing what is going on, because we're not blind, we can see it.
Yeah.
Now we're adults, but as children we could see it, and just being ignored, not heard, invisible. So
Mm-hmm.
I think definitely something that we need to work on as a generation. We need to work on
Yeah.
having conversations that are not so pleasant with our
Yeah.
children.
Yeah. And our children are robust enough to understand, obviously according to their age, so speak at the
Age.
level that they understand, but they're robust enough that you don't need to tell them a kind of fairy tale. So you don't need to make up kind of, and everything will be all right at the end of telling them about a divorce or a sickness, because you can't give them that guarantee. In terms of helping them with their mental health, if there is something going on in the family, what we know is helping the child understand exactly what's going on. Like you said, that stops them feeling like it's their fault or having an even worse scenario in their mind. And then helping them see that actually you are doing, or whoever is involved is doing, what they need to do to look after themselves. So then the child doesn't feel like they need to look after you. So for that child may be thinking, I can't go to school because if I'm in school, something might happen at home to a parent who's sick, or things might change at home when I come home. So the child knowing mommy is going to see the doctor, or so and so is doing what they need to do to look after or address the difficulty, means the child can actually just be a child in school. So that's what you're aiming for, as we're talking our children through life difficulties. And we'll all have them at some point. There might be an illness, there might be a move, there might be kind of an aunt coming to live with you because they've had a difficulty. Having a difficulty in life is not kind of a bad thing to be hidden. It's just how we kind of help our children understand it, live with it, and kind of we keep going.
That's such a good point. It's almost you're holding their hands and walking them through the difficulties that they would experience as well when they're adults.
Mm-hmm.
Life is not a fairy tale, it's full of hurdles and loops and things we have to jump over. But it's just kind of holding their hands through. And
Mm-hmm.
as you said, age appropriate conversations, but still not shying away from the reality.
Yeah.
So with this person that asked this question anonymously, I'm hoping they get the help they need. I'm hoping that they're able to get access to a therapist. So who would be the best person to speak to? Is it a school counselor or a child therapist?
I mean, all those people you've mentioned, so a counselor, school therapist, school, all have a role to kind of play in terms of children's mental well-being. And that's the first point to make, especially if there are people listening who may have come from So my home country is Kenya, and school's function was just to educate. School did not care about our emotional well-being or any of our other well-being. So to say, kind of, that's changed now. So your school, where a child is, are interested in your school, in your child's academic performance, but also their emotional well-being, their social well-being. So go to them if you're worried about your child. Even if your child hasn't said anything, but you're worried, go to them, talk to them. There will be people there whose role is to safeguard your child, who can help you notice if there's any concerns or take your concerns on board, keep an eye out on your child's friends, things like that, or give you information. If you're thinking, I'm not sure what's going on with my teenager, they won't talk to me. They may be talking to people in school who, you can get access to. Absolutely do that. And especially this question about a child refusing to go to school, you definitely want to have that line of communication with school open so that school understand why the attendance may be going down or their performance may be going down. In the UK, we're now moving to a place where we're recognizing children's mental health is an area to be funded. So a lot of areas will have lower level mental health practitioners connected to schools. So there may be somebody in your school who can speak to your child, can assess whether it is a mental health concern or a social concern. So it may be if your child's experienced bullying and that's the reason they don't want to come to school, of course they will be anxious, but that's not a mental health condition. It's because they've actually experienced something that they have rightfully a need to be afraid of and anxious about. So speak to somebody at the school, and the school can help you with that assessment about whether is this a mental health concern or another issue, and then kind of refer you appropriately. I mean, if there are issues around the home or other issues that are affecting your child, counseling is a really good place to go for your children, obviously if you can afford that. But I guess what I say to people is work the problem out. So if your child's really struggling because their social skills are not so great or they don't have many friends, well, help them be in places where they will make friends, clubs. Do you have friends who have other children? Help them with the problem that they are facing. Is it your child's actually going to school, but maybe the pace of learning is a little bit fast for them, so they're falling behind? Either you help them with the homework or extra kind of tuition or pay for someone if the child's having other difficulties. So I guess it depends on what your child's struggling with as to where you would and what's available to you where you are. But definitely, I am a qualified counselor, so I definitely recommend it. I think there's a place to help our children make meaning of those experiences that might distress them and learn strategies around how to manage their feelings, how to manage relationships, how to manage kind of when difficult experiences are happening that they can't avoid and they just need to go through them. I think that's a great place where children can learn all those things.
Wow, as you were speaking, I was just thinking about, because I'm a teacher and I know some of my students that are going through mental health challenges, and it's such a good idea if schools or government invest in having someone in school other than the parent and other than the teachers, because a lot of the times teachers are overwhelmed with workload, so they can't and they don't have the capacity or the knowledge to support a child struggling. But if there was someone separate in the school where that is what you're trained to do, then it's so important, and I think it would be really utilized. So it's something that I feel not just in the UK, it should be rolled out everywhere. And now, going back to what you said about, obviously, we've mentioned anxiety, we've mentioned children just drop their grades dropping. What other telltale signs would you say that indicates when a child is going through a mental health crisis or situation?
Sure. I think as parents or as carers, so you might be an auntie or a grandparent as the person caring for children in life, you will be able to tell, or you may be able to tell if there's a change in, let's say, kind of personality or behavior of a child. If they're outgoing child and they suddenly want to stay in or be in their room when they're in their house, they were really active, playing lots of sports, but now are reporting they're tired or don't want to join into those sports, that might be kind of some signs. I'm not saying all children who suddenly change, but that might be signs that the child is maybe experiencing low mood. And while we do not give children kind of mental health labels, That might be, think about low mood as you would see in, for example, in depression. So you might notice changes in behavior is the first thing I'm saying. Changes in personality is another one. You might notice, or your child might tell you that actually they're not feeling so good, that maybe they are really worried about something, or their thoughts are really worrying them or making them feel distressed. So some children might, and it's fairly common for children to experience kind of dark thoughts or worrying thoughts of parents dying, them dying, or kind of be afraid of the dark. And these thoughts to really cause them to be scared or feel distressed. Or your child might tell you, or you might notice your child just feels really low, really sad or flat a lot of the time. Or you might notice that the emotions seem to go from like really high and kind of really elated and bouncing off the walls, and then switching to kind of really down, really negative. So we're looking out for kind of changes in behavior, personality. Are they reporting really worrying thoughts or thoughts that are causing them distress, or are their feelings kind of different from what you know them to be? Those might be telltale signs that you're looking at for your child, and that will be maybe different with a 9-year-old to, for example, a 15-year-old, where for a 15-year-old, maybe changing in emotions may not be so much of a worry sign.
I was about to say the same because I know teenagers generally, all of a sudden they're like a bit moody. It's like they're,
Yeah,
and it's like because I teach grade 9, 10, and 11, and
yeah,
some of the girls I used to teach when they're in grade 7 were so like bubbly and like miss teacher, and now it's like so okay, all right, okay.
yeah,
But the thing is, we have an open line of communication, so I know they're good. So I know
yeah,
it's not distress. I know it's just like hormones. I'm not
yeah,
sure. I don't know what the
yeah,
biological reason is, but hey.
yeah. So, so you said, you had a line of communication, you've got that connection, you know that
Yeah.
child, you
Hmm.
know what kind of their core personality, if we account for teenage changes. So you will be
Hmm.
able to actually tell if that child is the change is actually beyond a teenage phase. And I guess
Yeah,
that's,
true.
hopefully that's the same for parents or people who are caring for children, that you can tell, okay, they're down this week because they didn't get a grade they wanted, or their friends moved or something. That's
Hmm.
normal, versus when there's a real sustained change. Is it a week or a month or 2 months or a whole term that you're noticing the change with a young person, then maybe we're thinking about telltale signs of something being amiss with your mental health. But yeah, having that connection with your child is so important. And my other gist is just my neighbor who has a 16-year-old. I literally was driving past, just her saying to me out of the blue, because she could see I had much younger children, saying, make sure at this age you make friends with your children, because when they're 16, you will really need it. And those are like the two sentences we've said to this neighbor, like, but it must have been so important for her to tell me. But I can see now why it's so important. If you've got that connection with your child, if you kind of know them, they know
100%.
you, it just puts you in a really good place to kind of spot when things are starting to shift as well. So that it's
Yeah.
not like months or years that your child says this was going on and you didn't notice. If you're having that connection with your child, it also helps you to notice things early and maybe respond a little bit early.
Yeah. Yeah. Because a child is not going to suddenly start sharing and expressing their fears or concerns if that relationship has not been established before.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'm finding that with some of my students, they feel comfortable speaking to some teachers because maybe they don't have that relationship at home. So I think it goes back to your first point, which is the line of communication should be like parents should speak to the teachers as well, speak to the school, everyone that is involved in your child's life. If there is an issue, you'll be surprised how much information I actually know about a child that a parent may
Mm.
not know, because maybe the child just doesn't feel comfortable. And this is where it's tricky because teachers are not trained counselors. You're kind of in charge of so many people. So sometimes you're left with, what do I do with this information I've been given? I think open line of communication is important for sure.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, and we all want to, whatever, me and you, we have children, so we want to be like if our children ever struggled with their mental health, what would we do? But it's the same things I'm kind of saying. I hope I have a good connection with my children, and I have to work at it when things kind of distract me a little bit. But if I have a good connection and I think something's going on, then I want to figure out what's the cause, what do I think is the cause, and if it's friends and we've addressed that issue and it's fine, but still my child's struggling, then thinking about kind of getting school on board, getting kind of professional help on board, and getting myself some support. That's the one bit that I think we can, as parents, if our child is sick, oh my God, we will go the full mile to look after them, to move heaven and hell and anything in between to make sure they're fine. But in the process, do we look after ourselves? Do we kind of forget?
Oh,
Do we forget ourselves? We feel guilty if
that
we should
is,
stop to take
yeah.
a coffee when we are waiting, at the doctor's or something. It, and that might be okay for kind of a broken leg, or because in 2 weeks time your child will be able to walk or do kind of be back on their feet and you can go back to your normal routine. With mental health, time frames are longer and nobody will tell you when things might go back to normal, whatever that is. So you need your stamina, you need to keep up your energy, you need to look after you, because actually you are part of helping your child be better. Again, not like physical
Such a
health
good point.
where your GP is giving them medication or your nurse. In mental health, you're part of that team that's helping your child be well. So you've got
100%,
to
100%.
you've got to look after your mental well-being, and then you've got to make sure you've got the energy to keep going.
Yeah. Parents play a pivotal role when it comes to their child's mental health. And if there is a crisis, as what you just said, you have to be able, and it's not a sprint. When it comes to mental, sometimes it's a marathon, it takes a long time.
Yeah.
So a parent needs to be empowered and equipped, to be able to manage that situation. Do you know if there are courses for parents to take in the
Yeah.
UK, or
Oh
they
my God.
are?
The government has funded a course called Mental Health First Aid. And most councils in the UK have that course available, or the government website has a course available for you to do. It's like your self-paced learning. There's videos and workbooks to work through that helps you kind of spot if somebody's going through a mental health crisis, and kind of how to talk to them, how to kind of help them take the steps they need to take to safeguard themselves. This is really aimed at kind of lowering the rates of suicide, where people would say somebody would suddenly take their life and nobody around would have known about it, or if
Noticed.
somebody is thinking about that, actually the people who have a greater reach of that person is not the GP, it's not the A&E, it's the friends around, it's the family members who can maybe say something to help that person take a slightly different route. So there's that course available. The other thing I will mention is we're growing in our understanding of neurodiverse conditions. So we are talking about mental health, and most people are aware of anxiety, depression. Some people might be aware of bipolar, because lots of celebrities kind of we're talking about that, or even borderline personality disorder. What's not so well publicized is things like autism, or I was going to say Asperger's, which was a term used, kind of autism conditions or learning difficulties, learning disabilities. All this kind of come under the large umbrella of mental health, but we think about autism as a difference within your neurobiology rather than a disease that might get better. So there are also courses for us to equip ourselves with an understanding of autism that are available nationally. But if you're in the UK, most of your local authorities will be offering courses on this for any parent, and they're really accessible. Like the language is about the same language that your child will be talking, and actually it will help you
Yeah.
gain a much better understanding of your child. Even if your child's mental health is really good, or even if they don't have difficulties kind of in terms of autism, it will still help you be in a really good position to support your child through the different stages of life, through the different challenges. I
That
absolutely
is so
recommend
true.
it for parents to do. I go on them for myself to learn as a parent, and of course as a practitioner, because you can't have too much
That
knowledge.
That is such a good point. One of my sons actually came to me the other day and said, "There's a boy in my class. I think he's a bully, but I don't think he's a bully because he hits me sometimes. He keeps hitting me, and he has a separate teacher." So as he was describing the situation, I could tell that the boy's got a learning disability, but I wasn't sure. I didn't have the language to be able to explain that to my son. I just said, "Oh, I think he needs some help. I think you need to be kind to him. I don't think he's intentionally trying to be mean to you. You know, he just thinks and acts slightly different. So you need to help him." But I didn't have the language. I didn't know what to say, and I was kind of
Mhm.
put on the spot.
Mhm.
So that is such a useful course, just as you were saying it, because I think it's all around us now. It's in the open. Like we need to equip
Mhm.
ourselves. How do we explain that to our child so our child understands? Because a child can see and say, "Oh, it's different. He's bullying me. He's a bit mean."
Yeah.
So yeah, it's such a good point. And I think that's such a useful course. I would include the links of these courses for those in the UK that want to take the course as well.
Yes, come on. We need to create a nation of everybody being equipped in some way. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Because you will
definitely.
be friends with, neighbor to, working with somebody who's just,
Mhm.
yeah, maybe going through a challenge or just slightly different with than you are. So, yeah.
Okay, I'm just going to ask you one more question to end this. What can we do? So, if a child has experienced a crisis and there's been issues, and maybe the mom is now finally trying coming to a place of awareness and educating herself, what can we do to mitigate or fix those issues? Is it like it's a permanent thing, or is it like, oh, maybe a mom could give up and say, "Oh, now there's trauma. I caused my child's trauma." Because I
Yeah.
think there's things we could do to kind of mitigate the issues of the past, or maybe something has happened already, and now the mom is now in a place where she wants to make things or do better.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, this is a question that I ask, looking back at kind of me being a parent to my children and thinking, oh, I wonder how that affected them. I hope it's had a positive impact. If I think it's had a negative impact, thinking, is that it? Does this mean that inevitably they will struggle kind of from a statistical point of view? No, because most people who have a mental difficulty, so not just struggling, but mental health difficulty at a low or moderate level, most people recover. Most people go on to do what they want to do with their lives. And most people do that without any symptoms or are taking part in their lives, enjoying their lives, being parents, working, even if some symptoms remain. So I try to shout about that from the rooftops that if there has been a mental health difficulty, most people
Mhm.
recover, most people live their lives. So you might be working with somebody who had perinatal depression. You might be working with somebody when they were a teenager who self-harm but now are fine. You might be working with somebody who had a difficulty with eating disorders or who still has a difficulty with that issue, but they're working, they have friends, they have relationships, they have a family, they're living the life that they want. So it's thinking about, we all have kind of, as one quote says, some people have scars on the outside from life experiences, playing, climbing things. If you've had mental health difficulties, you have scars. They just might be on the inside or they might be self-harm scars. But just because we have scars doesn't mean we're not taking part in life, and that we are barred from anything we want to achieve. So that's first thing, to kind of think about it in that way. It's a scar. How many scars do you have? They're there.
Several.
They're still part of you. And if it was a really
Exactly.
bad break, if you broke your leg and it healed, but it healed a little bit iffy, you'll still feel that pain. So if you had a mental
Yeah.
health difficulty or a trauma, it will still affect you, but you're still working, you're still living your life. In terms of
Mhm.
how to mitigate it, people take different routes. This is what I say, this is what I try to practice, acknowledge it. So
Mm.
going back to that thing of, children will know if a trauma has happened or if it's been something direct. You acknowledging it just really validates them. And that word is massive for children. Saying to a child, this happened, and I could see, or I know, or I think it hurt your feelings, it made you scared, you were worried about it. Just that by itself is really powerful. And that's not, you're not defining their experience. You're not saying you believe or disbelieve them. It's just saying what happened was significant for them and that it affected them. So practicing that kind of day to day is really good, and for the big things as well. And then if it's something you did, apologizing. Some cultures have
Oh,
a thing about that, but
that is
apologize.
a good point. That is a good point. Especially the African culture. Please, let's not even open the can of worms here, but it's
Yeah.
such a good point.
Yeah, but I think we're taught apologizing is almost we come to repent for sin. I want to move away from that, and I'm not preaching. It's for me, apologizing is going back to the first thing about, on so and so day when I promised to take you to this place, or when I left you with an uncle you'd never met before. I know that that left you feeling hurt or disappointed. I'm really sorry that you felt hurt and disappointed. That's what I want you to be saying. Not, forgive me for I have sinned and da, 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 da. Just, really saying to a child, this is what happened and this is how you felt. And I'm really sorry you felt like that. I would try to not do things that make you feel like that again. Or if you feel like that again because of something I'm doing, please come and tell me, because I will try to do things that don't leave you feeling like that. I think that's a fair deal, right? I don't want you
That
to
is
make
a
me feel
fair
frustrated
deal.
or
And it
scared.
makes them emotionally intelligent. It makes them emotionally intelligent because if you empower your children to know when you've offended and you're apologizing, when they grow up, they're not, it's like they're more emotionally intelligent people. If
Hmm.
someone does something to upset them, they can recognize that, okay, this person has upset me.
Yeah,
Now, if the person chooses to apologize, I would accept it. If they choose not to, it's
yeah,
fine. But they know they're aware, because
yeah,
sometimes people harm us and we don't even recognize that this
yeah,
person is is
yeah,
abusing us because they
yeah,
don't. So I think it makes them emotionally intelligent as well.
yeah. Like we
That
need
is
to have a
such a good
post that
point.
apologizing makes your child stronger, not
It
weaker.
does. It
And if
does.
your child's stronger, you are the one who gains as a parent. Because you
Naomi, this is serious. This point is like this can be a new topic on its own.
let's do it.
Apologizing to your child doesn't make them weaker, it makes them stronger. It makes
Yeah,
them emotionally intelligent as well.
yeah.
That is such a good point. So I'm
Yeah.
going to end today's episode. I wish I could talk to you more, but I'm mindful of the time. But I wanted to conclude with these three things. Each time we conclude an episode, I ask three questions and I want you to just complete it. So, being a mom
Has made me look at my childhood and my parents in a whole new light.
I feel happiest when
I feel happiest when I can be present. And that just means I think I am happiest when I can just be here talking to you and my mind is in looking forward to what I haven't done or need to be doing in about 20 minutes time, or I'm not kind of worried about how did that go? What do they feel? What do they think about me? When I can just kind of, I guess, relax or be present, just be here with you, enjoying this moment.
Okay, so I'm guessing mindfulness and meditation is big on your list of things that you do.
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. And finally, if you could tell 5-year-old Naomi something, what would you tell her?
Oh, if I could tell 5-year-old Naomi, I think I would say you're stronger than you think. So go for those things that you think you just might not be able to get to.
Wow, that's such a good one. Thank you so much, Naomi, for joining us today. Whoop,
Woo!
whoop. That was such a
Oh,
good
yes.
conversation. It was a loaded conversation. Thank you so much.